and welcome to my first tutorial. The first project I'm going to start with FilterForge version 7 is to turn a kind of crappy iPhone photo into something that you could print using noise, and the goal state is something that is grungy noise, looks like a photograph but also somewhat painterly. And there's a couple of things that I'll be adding in separate modules, like photographic like bloom, getting kind of a realistic film grain texture, things like that. But we'll start with the basics, how to break a bitmap image into a mathematical world and manipulate it. So we'll dive right in, starting now. This is the nighttime photo that I took with my iPhone. It's a church just down the street from where I live, and you can see that the highlights are gone, the shadows are mushy. You know, look at the iPhone compression. So I mean, if you printed this, it would look like, oh, you took an iPhone photo and you printed it. So we want, the success of this filter is if somebody looks at the output and says, wow, is that from a like, what is that, a film camera? How did you make that? And there you go, you've liberated yourself from the mobile device that everybody carries and have something you can create legitimate art with. Because let's face it, if you gave this thing to Leonardo da Vinci, I think he could probably create art with it. A cell phone, I mean. He probably, after he finished having an aneurysm with this magic computer box with a screen on it, he might realize its potential. So that's the image we're going to be using. Right, so now that you've just chosen an image, you've put an image tile on the action grid. I don't know, whatever you, palette, imaginary gridded space. You can change that grid in the preferences too. And I have mine set to snapping so that it snaps to, I think it's 1 unit. It helps arrange things, and it's a good idea to put your stuff in somewhat order while you're building, otherwise it becomes incomprehensible really quickly. Well, for me, putting a blend tile off the image tile, making that kind of a unit, because normal 100%, okay. Because if I continue developing this program, we officially have a filter, it does nothing. You'll want, maybe later you'll say, I just want to add a little yellow to the highlight, but I want to do it before any of this other processing because I want that yellow propagated out through all of my tree. So I'm going to want to put that, whatever it is I'm going to add, between this and this. Otherwise, you're going to have like 30 of these little connection sprues bristling from here, and you're going to have to, in some cases, it's going to be dragging it from here to way over here, trying to connect stuff up, reconnect it to a new functionality. So it's easier, save yourself some time in the long run. Just make that your header and this the source for the header, so that you can mess with the stuff in between later if you want. But otherwise it's just only one tile, and it doesn't add or change anything to the, now that we have ourselves a filter. And what I'm doing here is, if you're new to FilterForge, this is essential. Having a mouse with a scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out instantly, and right mouse button zoom pans around. So we want to now split this off and create a noise. So what noise do we want? I think for this one, I'm going to just want to stick to Perlin noise, although maybe we'll bring in a different kind of noise to show how we can use one to add certain things. So those are the two noises that I want to use. Okay, we have to build a little functionality here to convert the bitmap into a mathematical 3D, 2D, 3D, depending on how you look at it. Two-dimensional as in the grid, 0, 0 to x, x, because depending on how big your image is, plus the bit depth or value of the actual pixel itself. All of this information can be put into waveforms or math by plugging it into a curve, and I found through much trial and error from version 1 to now that this particular tile is really useful. It has a variable width, and I use it for a lot of things. So, but the thing is that it starts in the middle and goes out, which is kind of countered most of the other functionality where you've got the shadow on the left and the highlight on the right. So this is good if you use it in conjunction with that to say I want this range, like in the high mid-range, I want that there. And then with the shape, you can control the curve. And I mean, basically playing with it, you can see what it does. So I'm not going to cover these two, because this is all basic stuff. But for this purpose that I want it for, I want to use it as a conversion tool. So, and the width has to be at whatever it is per pixel. So what that looks like when it scans from pixel 1 to pixel 12 million, if it's a 12 megapixel, is this. Boom. So we see that the most of them is in the middle somewhere, right there, and then the rest of them are on the outside. Like, there's not a lot of bright ones, so those are the bright ones. And then when that looks like in 2D again, is this. Hold your applause. So this is the original image converted into a noise. And you can see it blows out a little bit, so we'll deal with that. And keep in mind with the noise, the noise channel is the noising part is happening. So this is the highlights that are all being noised. And we'll deal with the shadows with a different technique, or just the flipping around basically. So, what's next? Now we understand that we can put a bitmap into a curve and come out the other end and use it to drive a noise. Now this is genuine pixel per pixel noise, whereas plugging it directly into the noise gives you this, which is blech. Mac, which has a disease. It's got noise. So yeah, I prefer it this way. So now we got the stone. We'll deal with the stone later. So we've converted it to a curve, now we converted it to a noise, and the noise is unsatisfactory. Why? Well, we did mess with the shape. So let's give the user the ability to change the shape, because we could also drive it with the image itself. That tends to make harsh shapes where it's bright and soft shapes where it's dark. So that ends up contrasting the image up quite a bit, and I don't want that. So I'm going to control the shape manually. And you can see the net impact on it here in the highlights. Suddenly now, if we change the curve shape of the overall curve, we can actually, oh, look at that. There's a lot of things we can do with this information, especially if you're trying to rebuild the highlights with an image that has none, like this one. But for now, we're just going to leave it in the middle somewhere. And okay, so now we're in the middle. We're getting this result, which is fine for what we need for now. And next we're going to refine the noise, look a little less artificial. Next we have to, well, we don't have to, I'm going to. What happened to Carmen Sandiego? She became part of the noise. Now we're going to create 4 of these things. So I'm just building the skeleton here quickly. Now, tip: if you're going to copy and paste a bunch of things, just set the things you're going to have to set 4 times or 5 times. It's first. So I'm going to want this to be screen. It won't matter what, because I'm going to hook up something to it. So copy, paste, 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 and then quickly connect them all. Connect that up to opacity. So we got the opacities hooked up. Make sure it's 100. So it's usually somewhere on there. At the bottom, you just use that as a guide. Make sure you got some highlights. So now you may have noticed that it really has very little difference to any of the other 4 identical noises we've got being blended together to form the same thing that we've got in each of. So what was the point? Well, the seed values in each of these are still at their default, which is 1. So I think to make my life easier and to demonstrate a feature, not a bug, going to call this seed to grow beautiful noise. I'm going to put that into the variation slot, which is essentially a mathematical seed value. I prefer seed because it describes better in my brain what the purpose of that slider is. And that's to change the underlying value that the formula itself is based on. And that's just kind of like root access to the formula itself. X equals whatever it goes in the seed value. And then that's like iterated on. So now we should have noise that looks different, but we don't, because basically we just put the same number in each slot. What to do? Well, luckily these things have a little tool built in for exactly this problem. Those days when you've got stubborn similarity that needs a little bit of variability that you can control. So this guy goes to this guy, and now it has options. Hello, welcome to a little aside talking about how step and offset works in relation to using noise and different seed values. If you're creating a texture, this texture here for example, and this is groups. I'm using groups. This is what okay, so this is the group, and you can see that the step is 1 and the offset is 0. What step does is multiply whatever comes in by the value, so essentially 59 times 1. If I were to change the step value to 2, it would be 118. So that would make the variability of that, oh I can't because I'm just changing max value and I don't want to do that. It's locked because this is coming from the outside. This is a group, right? This group here. So this is 4 because its step is 2, incoming is 2, so it goes to 4. But I want to use offset because when I'm using a bunch of different noises, the number of variations is something like 30,000. However, when you start nesting loops, or nesting, when you start nesting groups with controllers, their maximum starts multiplying and you run into problems. So this is an easy way to keep track of things. Every time you build a group, make sure that the slider controls 1, 2, 3, whatever, and it starts with the value coming in. Offset is 0. The next one is offset 1, offset 2. So we got a value of 2, 3, and 4. This gives you plenty of room, and using a controller on the outside, we have a maximum value of 70. Even though the ones on the inside only have 100, this is 70. If I make this anymore, it'll break telling me I can't go above 100. So I suppose if I wanted to get around this, I could set these to be, this to be 1000. Now I could theoretically set this to be 200 and I should be okay. So now I can have a value up to 200. And each of these is 128, 126, 126. So I haven't even touched these. 126. Step 0, 1. So I should only know how many noise tiles are in this group, which is 3. So 126, I want that value to be 126. The next one, I want it to be 126 plus 3. So, but I always just give it a little extra. So I'm just going to offset by the number of tiles plus a couple, 5. Then the third one, I'm going to offset by that plus, or twice. So the number of 10. So now no matter what I dial in here, 1, 6, 11, each number is far enough away from what's inside the groups to interfere. So no matter what dial you do it here, you got a different number. And every noise tile has the same, or a different seed value. So the noise you get at the end is a sandwich of all 9 noises well, 3 noises instanced across 3 groups. So actually only these noises, and then these ones are the same. See, an instance. Okay, so that's how when you connect a inslider to something that has a variation or a repeat factor, not something that isn't finite. Because if you connect it to something like the scale, see, you get 0 to 300, a finite range. But something like variation, you're faced with this step offset thing. So just remember that the offset just takes, actually both of these take whatever value you give it and either multiply it or just add to it. And at the end result is this. And you can see that the difference is a much less uniform, much more natural looking noise. So now we've managed to break out one mathematical description of an image, pipe it to 4 different Perlin nodes, and then using a blender that you can control, sandwich them all together into one bump map or bit map or whatever you want to call it. So now I'm going to throw this into the mix in the next segment.